Quarterback controversy? Well, quarterback situation, whatever you want to call it, Iowa's got a quarterback choice. We talk about that after their one open practice we get at Kids Day today. Locked On Hawkeye.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes Podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. If you're listening podcast only, 5-star reviews, greatly appreciated. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Playoffs to finish up. The sports just stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We kick off the week with a big conversation that needs to be had at the quarterback position for Iowa football. And after the Kids Day open practice, our one glimpse at this team before we'll see them on the field at Kinnick Stadium coming up on August 31st against Illinois State. It's our first chance to see this and the only one. And because of that, we overreact. And we start right there with this conversation. This is an overreaction. This is one of 20, 25 practices that the coaches are going to see throughout the course of the fall. But I think there are a couple of important notes that come out of this and a couple of different things that we need to get into. We'll also talk with Scott Dochterman, who was at Kinnick Stadium, get his perspective on not just this quarterback situation, which is the headline number one a topic, obviously, of the day, but also some of the other guys that popped, some other guys that were outstanding, and some other concerns that come up with this Iowa football team that comes in with a lot of expectation, certainly, for this football season. We'll also talk about the potential of a 5-star commitment for the Hawkeyes. It sounded like over the weekend, Iose Epenesa maybe was close to making his commitment. We'll see the latest on that front. But let's get into it here and start at the top. And it's a situation at the quarterback spot that has always befuddled me, how Kirk Ferentz goes down the road of struggling to make a change at the quarterback position, because you go too early in his career, his first year, really in his first couple of seasons, there are quarterbacks all over the place. It's Scott Mullen and John Butcher and Kyle McCann and Brad Banks and just on and on and on. There was all kinds of shuffling, and especially those first couple of years, it was even more. It was just, that was maybe trying to find whatever you could do to make things fit. But to where he is today and what we've seen really over the last 4 years of quarterback ineptitude, unlike anything that we've seen over that kind of prolonged stretch, certainly in my lifetime, going back to the beginning of the Hayden Fry era to where we are today, we haven't seen the kind of ineptitude at that position coupled with the unwillingness to make a change. And that's the confusing and confounding part to me about Kirk Ferentz. If a left tackle is struggling, he'll make a move. If a linebacker's not playing well, he's willing to make the change. But at this spot, at quarterback, it has become more and more difficult, and digging his heels and deeper when there is pushback about why aren't we seeing the backup quarterback when the play has been this bad. That's a conversation for another day. We'll get into a little bit deeper kind of how we got here at this moment in time. Anyway, you slice it up, Cade McNamara was brutal. The numbers are absolutely egregious. To anticipate that you could possibly have a quarterback at this kind of level playing like this. Yes, it is a new system. You start there. New system, okay, you have concerns. Okay, fair enough. Learning, coming off injury. I believe that is something that also has to be a big part of the conversation of what you're seeing overall, what you're seeing with him coming off that. We're talking about a guy that not just went through an ACL tear. An ACL tear in its own right, that's something, right? That's something that overall, yes, guys coming back off of ACL tears, they're going to struggle. But he also lost the previous season because of a knee injury. He also had that significant injury Kids Day a year ago. And if he's apprehensive, if he's a little slower in the pocket than you'd like, I think we can all understand that. But we don't got much time. And we are now basically a week and a half away from getting started. That's where we are. And because of that, and because of how close that we are, you don't have time to get him right mentally, to get this fixed. If it's more a mental aspect than it is anything physically, there's not enough time. McNamara from the Des Moines Register finished the day 8 of 24 for 20 yards. That's a check down Charlie. One interception, that was a pick six. Brendan Sullivan played better, but not much. 10 of 21, but still only for 76 yards. Now, another thing that needs to be said, McNamara was going up against mostly the number one defense, and we know how good the number one defense is, where Brendan Sullivan, on the other hand, was going up against the number twos and number threes. So you have to also put that in there. Now, you could also say that you had Cade McNamara playing with the number ones offensively, and he was playing with the number twos. Again, we're talking ourselves in circles, and that's not what we're trying to do here, because here's my bottom line for this. Cade McNamara will be the starter. He will start game one. And the reason that I believe that is not anything that we saw on Saturday, because if you watch Saturday, you saw two guys that were really struggling and one that was the ultimate struggle in Cade McNamara. It's because this is the way that Kirk Ferentz operates at the quarterback position. That's what I keep coming back to. Do I believe that Brendan Sullivan should be right there? Do I believe that Brendan Sullivan should be getting number one reps? I don't think there's any doubt about it. And from the little glimpse that we've seen and from what we have heard, absolutely that should be there. As a thrower, Brendan Sullivan is not an elite level passer. That's not what he is. But he's okay. He can also do things with his legs. And in this offense, is he a better fit? Is Brendan Sullivan today, putting everything together, a better guy to start for 2024 than Cade McNamara? An argument could be made. Is he going to be, is his top level, let's put it this way, is his top level as good as Cade McNamara's top level? I don't think so. Will we ever see the top level again, though, of Cade McNamara that we once saw when we saw him lead Michigan to their first Big Ten title in 20 years, lead them to the college football playoff? Will that guy ever come back? We just don't know the answer to that one. And that's the scary spot that Iowa finds himself in. They got an Iowa State team that will come in hungry in week 2. They got to go on the road to Minnesota in week 4. They have a 10-win team in between in Troy. Now, they lost a ton from a year ago. That's going to be no picnic. And of course, Ohio State still looms over the first month of the season. The schedule is not overly daunting, but it is difficult early in comparison to some of the games. They can't afford, likely, to get through with a realistic path to getting into the college football playoff. They can't do it with a hobbled Cade McNamara or a mentally broken Cade McNamara and try to fix him. Schedule starts early. You got to be ready to go. And if they're not, maybe Brendan Sullivan is that guy. We will have a whole lot more on this one. Let's talk to one of the guys that was there, Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. We'll get his perspective on what he saw on Saturday, not just the quarterback situation, some other players that popped. Are there other concerns that come out with this Iowa football team? We'll talk about all that as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. He was at Iowa Media Day. He was at the kids practice on Saturday. Doc covers college football for The Athletic, and he joins us. Doc, thank you. Trent and Ken, good to speak with you. I guess we'll go right to the big talker that came away from Saturday. Was the play of the quarterback. Left a lot of people that perhaps some with unreal expectations, unfair expectations, but a lot of people thought, here we go again. What was your thought, Doc, on what you saw from the QBs?
They got a legitimate competition right now. It's not anything that I expected, frankly. I mean, I'd kind of heard whispers throughout camp for the first week that, Cade's kind of slow coming around to some of this stuff. And Sullivan's actually playing well. But then, a couple of people really clued me in and said, this is closer than you think it is. And then when I went out and watched it for myself, I was like, wow, this is there's a real struggle, I would say, with Cade McNamara, and it's not just learning the offense. I think it's applying his fundamentals to throwing the football, and then I think Brendan Sullivan looked pretty good. Now, he didn't look great, and maybe in some of that may be unrealistic to expect because he just got to Iowa a couple months ago and he's only really been working with this team for a week. But overall, it was no comparison. Brendan Sullivan was the better quarterback, and you guys know me, I'm not very hyperbolic when it comes to quarterback controversies or competitions. But if this trends in this direction, they'll have no choice but to play Brendan Sullivan.
You also know, as you've been going through the beat for a number of years, that Kirk Ferentz's unwillingness to make a change at the quarterback position. Do you believe that there is a real chance that snap number 1 of the season, Brendan Sullivan is a guy, or is it still going to be McNamara? And if the crud happens that you saw on Saturday, maybe a change will just happen quicker. Kind of, where are you as you look towards the beginning of the season?
With Kirk, all these years, yes, he's always been reluctant to flip away from a returning starter. But when you start to really examine the equity or lack thereof that McNamara has put into this program, I mean, he played in 4 games last year, was pretty unimpressive. Now, a lot of that was his injury, and we get that new team. Things should have started coming together, and then he tore his ACL, and he's just back. I don't think that this is a situation, though, where he's going to just hang on. I mean, we saw it a lot with Petrus, but then when we look back, Petrus was the best quarterback that they had, and that didn't make anybody happy, but there was nothing there that made you go, yeah, that needed to happen. And eventually he did flip from Rudock to Beathard, but Rudock was a pretty good quarterback too. So I think in this case, though, when you've got a new offensive coordinator who's really, in tune with this offense, and you look at the body language and the way that they're answering questions, and instead of Kirk, multiple times in July and in May, he was like, yeah, Cade's our starter. He seemed very non-committal to that. I think Cade is still, if the game started this week, he would still be the starter. But I also think that based on what I saw and the way that they're talking, I don't think this is just an automatic for him. Now, if he's just rusty and he's just really trying to catch up and it's taking him some time, that's understandable. But I saw a lot of questions at that position, and that's really the only one I saw that had me kind of, a little bit concerned about Iowa, because I think that the offensive line looked 1,000 times better than I've seen them in years. And their running game looked great. So I think this is something that, will be the ultimate concern. And if he needs to make the change, I think he will, because new offensive coordinator does have his ear.
I want to get into the trenches with you, Doc, regarding the offensive line. And by all accounts, and you saw with your own 2 eyes, they have taken a step forward. In fact, there's a lot of folks out there that were at the games thought that they maybe dominated. It might be too strong a word, but I've heard it. The defensive line for Iowa, that Craig and Herkett and Black and Graves not pushed around, but certainly didn't have an impact like that group you would have thought. So maybe good news on the offense, maybe not concerned, but just what's going on in the trenches, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the yin and yang when you go to these practices. I mean, if somebody hits a big play, it's like, wow, the offense looks good and the defense looks terrible, or, running the football or whatever. But what I wanted to see was, I primarily concentrated on offense and at quarterback. But what I liked was the way that they got vertical, the push that they got, the ability to even defend in the pocket, I thought was really strong. And I was very impressed. And I think the defensive line looks pretty good too, overall. I mean, I think everybody's just surprised because it's been a few years since the offensive line had that kind of pop to it. And, the guys that are 5th-year guys looked like it. Mason Richmond, Connor Colby, Logan Jones, they were out, making some moves. And you could tell that the defense had to respect that a little bit more than they had in the past. And am I concerned about the defense? Not really. I think there's some areas that you want to get improved, a little bit more depth up front and, a little bit of injury situation in the back end. I don't know, TJ Hall just kind of tweaked an ankle, but I do think that overall, you had to come away and say, if there was one thing that impressed me the most, it was the way the offensive line blocked. And George Barnett told me that before. We just had a side conversation before the practice started. He's like, you know offensive line play. You're going to see something different today than you've seen in the past. And I walked away going, yep, absolutely. This is the Iowa offensive line that we saw the middle part of the last decade.
Did it without the returning starter, LaShawn Williams, but Caleb Johnson's the dude. And it sounded like he had a practice. He was maybe the guy that we saw 2 years ago when he burst onto the scene as a freshman. He's different than any back that they have in the stable in my mind, Doc. If you get a healthy and committed Caleb Johnson this year, feels like the sky's the limit. What'd you see out of him?
Yeah, I really liked him. There was a sweet play, and I'll say this, the other thing I liked and I really appreciated was I saw different schematic changes, which I'm like, I have not seen that play before.
Yeah.
And of course, it's like eating a cardboard cracker for so many years. And now you got salt on it and it's like, wow, it's got flavor. But I've seen a bunch of stuff that I was like, okay, I come away impressed with the way they did it. And yeah, he finally has space. And he was able to turn the corner. There was a sweep that he had that was really good. I like the motion that they used, and it was subtle. It wasn't just like motion to motion, but one time it was like a tight end that kind of moved to the quarterback, and then the snap went back the other way and locked up head on with the defensive end and knocked him down. I mean, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I was equally impressed with Kamari Moulton. You could tell that the weight he has gained has been good weight. He's much more physical on his lower half, and he's got great feet in the hole. So overall, when it comes to the running game and the line and the running backs, I'm more impressed than I've been since maybe about 2016 when they had LaShawn Daniels, Akram Wadley, and a really good chemistry up front.
3 phases. So let's do the special teams. Reese Dakin and Drew Stevens, whatever was ailing him at the end of the year, seemingly to his credit, he's put behind him because by all accounts, he's been fantastic throughout August. And you guys saw it on Saturday. Dakin and Stevens, your thoughts?
Yeah, I didn't pay as much attention to them as I probably should have, but I thought that, overall, Stevens looked the part like he did up until about, the last 2 to 3 weeks of November, and they didn't need him in the bowl game in the Big Ten championship game. But, Reese Dakin to me is, he was drilling some shots, before practice, and had a one where it was Taylor-esque. I mean, he had like a 60-yard punt that landed like at the 10 and then just went sideways. And I'm like, wow, if that's the case, then they're, it's going to stink missing Torrey Taylor, but they'll be okay there. So overall, I think that they're in good hands. I mean, as always, it comes down to execution in games, but I don't think that's as much of a concern I think on the list of concerns, you start with quarterback 1, 2, 3, and 4, then wide receiver is probably 5 and 6, and then after that, maybe something else. But and then I put special teams at like 20.
Reese Vander Zee, the freshman, big-bodied guy that they don't have a whole lot of, comes in. He was getting some reps with the number 1. What'd you see the freshman out of Northwest Iowa?
He seemed okay. I mean, they all kind of blended together in some ways because I was really concentrating on the quarterbacks. And I thought, he looked the part. I thought same thing with Jarrett Bowie. I really liked what I saw out of him. The one person that people have raved about and the way he's played is Jacob Gill. And since coming in from Northwestern, both, I had 2 offensive linemen tell me on Friday, they're like, we love that guy because the way he blocks. And as we said, if you get with the running game, if you got a receiver who can at least get in there and mix it up and do something on, with a defender in the run game, that's going to get you on the field immediately. And, but I think in some ways though, it was hard to judge the receivers based on the struggles the quarterbacks had. But I did like the route, concepts. I like the spacing of the field a lot better. And I like the fact that they were using more swing passes. I think that's, and that's both the backs and the receivers. So when it comes to the scheme, it's a complete change, and it's one that I think people should really recognize is completely different.
45 seconds left, Doc. Terrell Washington Jr., your thoughts on him?
A good player. As I said, kind of with all of them, it's really hard to gauge. I mean, late in this game, he flipped back to running back and he was running really hard. I think he could compete there too if they wanted him to. They just need to get good athletes on the field, and he's certainly one of them. And in week one, when you don't have Caleb Brown, they're going to need to get him in there. So overall, talented player. I think he's going to rotate at receiver, and I think it's going to probably be something where it takes them, maybe a month before they start to get, really organized in who's going to play and how often.
Doc, what do you got coming up with the Athletic this week?
Yeah, tomorrow we've got coming out the ultimate Big Ten road trip. Jesse Temple and I ironed it out where you can't go to the same spot twice, and you can't take the same team 2 weeks in a row. So we decided to go for 14 weeks where would we go. And then later on, I've got kind of a big picture look at the Iowa defense, which will go more national. And it's kind of like, how does this thing work? And, from the two gaps to the back quarter, half to, just the way they play. So I've got that later this week. And then over the weekend, I wrote about the quarterback competition and has the potential to become a controversy.
That it does. Scott Dochterman from The Athletic joining us here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. We continue Locked On Hawkeyes, little 5-star talk. And as always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On College Football podcast. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for a big season coming up on the football field with discussion on the upcoming season and the changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, new college football expanded playoffs, and a whole lot more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. All part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A 5-star. Yes, Iose Epenesa. Is it going to happen? We'll talk about it when we come back. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Look, I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop, but the playoffs have wrapped up. The Olympics are done. We're just getting fewer and fewer things to bet on. And when the sports aren't sporting like I want them to, well, I get a little frustrated. That's okay, because FanDuel, they let me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers. That's right, new and existing customers with a boost or a bonus daily. Each and every day, there is something for everyone. Every day, all summer long at FanDuel. What you want to do is head over to FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. Maybe you're taking a look to the football season. There's all kinds of bets up. Games of the year, including the Iowa Hawkeyes. Maybe you're a big NFL fan. You want to start taking a look at that. There's point spreads up for games. There's futures you can bet into. Who's going to win the Super Bowl? Who's going to get to the Super Bowl? Who's going to win the division? And a whole lot more all over at FanDuel.com. FanDuel is the place to be. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Again, a boost or a bonus each and every day for all customers. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. So there was a little bit of buzz on Saturday, first before Kids Day began, as we got to hear that Iose Epenesa, the 5-star defensive lineman from Edwardsville, Illinois, was back on campus. Of course, his dad played for Hayden Fry back in the late 90s. His brother, an All-American for the Hawkeyes, and now a Buffalo Bill, and AJ Epenesa. And we're waiting for Iose, a guy that was described as maybe the best of the litter, best of the bunch, a guy, the youngest of the group. And how many times do we hear that about the youngest? And his recruitment has been different, certainly, than AJ's. It's different for a myriad of different reasons. First of all, he's a different young man. He's the youngest of the family, and in a big family, sometimes that is different, in a different direction to go. But maybe most importantly, it's different because of what we're going through right now and the changing landscape of college athletics as it pertains to NIL, pay for play, all those different things that go hand in hand with it. Oh, yes, I know it's not pay for play, but we all know it is. Yes, pay for play. That aside, it's different. And because of that, recruiting's different. Look, I was in good shape compared to many programs out there when it comes to the finances that are available for the players. They're in good shape. Not elite level, though. Not at the level like some of the programs that is after Iose Epenesa. And it sounded like for a while that Miami was one of those teams, certainly with the finances, as we know, that can compete at the highest level. Another program that was up towards the top of his list was Utah. Now, a different element with Utah is the background of some of their players and the Polynesians that Iose Epenesa is, and more people with a similar kind of background and a similar upbringing than what he had. Just more people like you. And a lot of times for people, that is important when it comes to the world of recruiting. Yet on Saturday, he's there. And it led some people to speculate and believe that maybe a commitment was coming, a commitment was happening. From what I have heard, a commitment has not happened, but the gap that looked like Iowa maybe was running behind, that Iowa was a little bit further behind in the race that even some people wanted to even speculate about, that gap has closed up. Iowa's been consistent. Their messaging has been the same. Their messaging is what it is for everybody. The family connections, what they can do, the ability to get to the league, the ability to live very comfortably as a college athlete and make some money. All those things and all the messaging has remained the same. But some of the other things out there and some of the differences that you see in this landscape and some of the shady elements that are out there, I think also a component. And his dad, Iose Epenesa, had something up on Facebook that talked a little bit about that. Again, you're reading through lines, and that's what you have to do when it comes to the world of recruiting and talking about 16, 17, 18-year-old kids is, yes, you get that component to it too. This thing's not over. I was not out of it. I don't think it's a lock either that he's going to be a Hawkeye. It's a great family. He's a great young man. He's a guy that is going to be very easy to root for, an ability to come in there and be a player that is impactful. Look, when Iowa gets guys of this magnitude, more times than not, they hit. Yes, you can bring up Blake Larson. That was a quarter century ago, right? We're going back a long, long ways from when we have to go back to Blake Larson. For the most part, these top-level guys, they hit. And there's no sure things. There's no automatics. It's football. Injuries happen. All kinds of things can happen. This would be a good one. We'll keep an eye on that one and bring you the latest, and we'll see what happens with 5-star defensive lineman Iose Epenesa. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. For your second listen, make sure you go check out the Locked On College Football Podcast. From NIL deals to the never-ending. Oh boy, it just continues, right? Conference realignment rumors that are out there. Well, don't worry, Spencer McLaughlin, he's got you covered with everything that's happening, including the upcoming season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. All part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We got you covered on the Hawkeye front. Coming up this week, we got a whole lot more coming your way. We will also start to talk not just about the quarterback position. Yes, there are other positions that were out there. We'll talk about some of the other players that were impactful. We'll dive a little bit deeper, of course, into the quarterback position. That's what we're going to do. We got you covered every day with Hawkeye content here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for being with us. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.